Ladies and gentlemen, please settle down. We will start soon. Thank you very much.
A very good morning to everyone. I hope you had a lovely coffee break. And once again, I would like to welcome you all to this expert dialogue on next generation solar ecosystems, on AI, storage, hydrogen, and circularity. Just a decade ago, the question confronting Europe was straightforward. Can solar scale? And today, the answer is unequivocal yes, and I'm extremely happy about that. Europe has demonstrated that energy transition is not an aspiration, it is happening now. Solar capacity in the European Union has expanded rapidly, growing from approximately 330 gigawatts in 2024 to more than 406 gigawatt in 2025. Renewables account for 47% of Europe's electricity consumption, with solar contributing nearly a quarter of renewable electricity generation. Under REPower EU, solar deployment is projected to reach around 600 to 700 gigawatt by 2030, placing it at the heart of Europe's energy security and climate ambitions. These are some of the remarkable achievements of the continent. But success has created a new set of questions. How do we manage increasingly complex grids? How do we store renewable energy when the sun isn't shining? How do we decarbonize industries that are difficult to electrify? How do we ensure today's clean technologies don't become tomorrow's waste challenges? In other words, the future of solar is no longer simply about megawatts. It is about ecosystems. Ecosystems that are intelligent, powered by AI and digitalization, flexible, enabled by storage and green hydrogen, sustainable, built on circularity, responsible resources usage, and resilient, capable of withstanding cyber threats, supply disruptions, and the uncertainties of a rapidly changing world. And as we have seen with all our member countries, this is not a European conversation alone. Europe's energy transition is increasingly interconnected with the rest of the world through supply chains, critical minerals, innovation ecosystems, and emerging markets, as we discussed about even in the yesterday's section. This is precisely where International Solar Alliance has a unique role to play, creating bridges between Europe and ISA member countries through innovation partnerships, pilot projects, technology cooperation, and knowledge exchange. Because the future of solar is no longer measured simply in megawatts installed. It will be measured by how intelligently we integrate it, how flexibly we manage it, how sustainably we manufacture and recycle it, and how equitably we share its benefit across the entire world. And that's exactly the conversation we hope to have over the next 90 minutes in this session. But I welcome you once again on behalf of International Solar Alliance, and thank you all for joining us for today's conversation. And to help set the stage from a global technology perspective, it is my great pleasure to invite Mr. Timur Gul, Chief Energy Technology Officer of International Energy Agency. As IEA has consistently highlighted both the extraordinary opportunities and the emerging complexities of the clean energy transition, Mr. Gul, may I invite you to share your special remarks, please? The floor is yours.
Yeah, very happy to. Thank you, first of all, for the kind invitation to contribute to the discussion today. So my name is Timo Gül. I'm Chief Energy Technology Officer of the International Energy Agency. And what I would like to do, and hopefully it's going to frame the discussion that is in many ways covering an incredibly broad range of topics that are linked to the solar ecosystem. I would like to share with you 5 messages, perhaps, that as they come out of our analysis here at the IEA. The first one, and I think that was already part of the introductory remarks just now in a way, is that we have entered the age of electricity and that solar is a defining technology in that age of electricity. There are 2 elements to back up that statement. The first one is that our latest data from last year confirms that electricity demand is now growing more than twice as fast as overall energy demand. And the second part of that is that for the first time in history, the primary driver of that growth is a modern renewable source, which is solar PV, which is, as you all know, a technology that barely existed as an industry some 2 decades ago or so, and is now the single largest contributor to energy supply growth on the planet. In Europe, and that was also part of the opening already, solar and wind together surpassed fossil fuels and generation share for the first time in 2025. So the age of electricity is here, and solar a very important defining technology as part of that. My second point is a bit the water and the wine, if you wish. The next chapter, this is my second message, will be demanding. This is just simply because global electricity demand is accelerating. It's driven by industrial uses, it's driven by electric vehicles, it's driven by data centers, air conditioning, all of which are all pulling electricity demand up. The issue is largest in a way in emerging economies, which are set to account for nearly 80% of the additional use of electricity moving forward. But demand in advanced economies, including in Europe, is also accelerating again after many, many, many years of stagnation. The challenge is now whether our systems are ready to absorb that growth reliably, affordably, and securely, which means an enhanced focus on grids. Today, more than 2,500 gigawatts of projects encompassing renewable storage and data centers are currently stalled in grid connection queues worldwide. That is a real issue. The age of electricity requires us to be fast and serious in terms of the expansion of grids and system flexibility, but such investment is just not happening yet at the required scale. My third point is on artificial intelligence, an important topic in every single discussion that you're going into now, and obviously will be front and center in your debate today as well. Artificial intelligence sits at the center of both the challenge and the solution. Data centers are now one of the fastest growing sources of electricity demand, growing 17% in 2025 alone, and AI is the primary driver here. Our estimates suggest that data center electricity consumption is set to double by 2030, and this is a new and significant pressure on the system, one that did not exist at scale just 5 years ago. But of course, AI is also a powerful tool for managing the very systems that it is training. It can optimize grid capacity, anticipate failures, and help energy-intensive industries meaningfully to reduce the energy cost. So the energy sector must take full advantage of it, but it currently is not doing that. My fourth message is that beyond AI, there are other technologies that are shaping the next generation solar ecosystems, and they are evolving very, very quickly. Innovation in this sector, and as I said, I'm in charge of technology here at the IEA, is genuinely exciting. Battery prices have fallen over 90% since 2010, and nonetheless, the pace of patenting and storage has never been higher. Almost 1 in 2 energy patents today are related to batteries and other energy storage items. Patenting related to battery circularity is growing even faster than battery patenting in general. And even in solar, where the industry is extremely mature, perovskite cells are now dominating the patent landscape. Last year, the world's first solar cell exceeding 33% efficiency at commercial dimensions was achieved. Here, Europe is, unlike many sometimes say, well positioned to lead this next wave of next generation solar ecosystem technologies. European startups accounted for 1/4 of global energy venture capital last year, up from just 15% 5 years ago. And this brings me to my very final point, which is about resilience. Regardless of how we think about the future, resilience must be the core of what we're building. Supply chains for the technologies of the age of electricity remain highly concentrated, in particular on China. That concentration is a strategic vulnerability for the economic security of many countries. Managing it through diversification, investment in domestic capacity, innovation, and strategic partnerships can therefore be very important for countries that are looking to play a role in manufacturing the technology and not only deploying it itself. In closing, let me just say that in recent years, the world has built extraordinary momentum in solar deployment. Europe has been very much at the forefront of this. We heard that in the opening already. It's the second largest growth market after China, so this is quite an achievement. The task now is to move from capacity to capability, to combine infrastructure, technology, and supply chains in a way that builds genuinely integrated, flexible, and resilient energy systems. From the IEA, we're, of course, very committed to supporting countries on this journey through data advice and these kind of evidence-based dialogues that will be at the heart of today's session. So thank you very much for having me today, and I very much wish you a rich discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gul, for your very thought-provoking insights and highlighting key important 5 messages: system flexibility, investments that are required for these times, AI at the heart of the discussion, resilience, new technologies, and the resilience and energy security that we're talking about nowadays, and also the flexible systems and moving towards skilling as well. And as you mentioned, AI is at the center of all discussions. One such initiative is Global Mission on AI for Energy, which seeks to harness artificial intelligence to make energy systems smarter, more efficient, and more inclusive. To share ISA's perspectives, it is my pleasure to invite Mr. Ashish Khanna, Director General of International Solar Alliance, to share his remarks. Mr. Khanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gurleen. Wonderful to have you, Taimur, all the colleagues and distinguished guests. What I'm going to spend next 5-7 minutes is not to give you the breadth of how we see artificial intelligence implications. As Taimur mentioned, the data centers, both in terms of ability of solar to supply the data center demand, their impact on the grid, the costing, and what it does to system stability are issues for AI in itself. There are also huge issues on grid modernization in terms of transmission systems flexibility that are extremely essential. But what I'm going to focus on, which we are seeing as one of probably the most defining need from Global South, is the impact of AI on distribution sector. And therefore, this is not about energy for AI, it's more for AI for energy. And I'll first mention about what are the issues we are seeing in the developing world. When I was in Sri Lanka 2 months back, and of course that was my second visit because I went last year, the Prime Minister repeatedly mentioned their biggest concern being that during a macroeconomic risk of 2021, when the system did not have enough fuel to have energy, almost the entire system adopted rooftop solar, which led to a system of 4 gigawatts having 2.5 gigawatts of rooftop solar. And at current systems, because of the net metering, the distribution system no longer has the capability to absorb the dynamic dual energy flow of such a high amount, and that led to curtailment and, of course, a huge consumer resentment. Then I go to the Indian state of Rajasthan that has done 10 gigawatts of solarization of pumps for agriculture irrigation. That meant almost 10 gigawatts of distributed renewable energy that came because of agriculture. Another 1 million households on solar rooftop, and there the distribution company was not able to optimize overall power purchase. That is really happening in the system because almost 40%, 50% of distributed renewable energy throwing energy back into the grid not only led to distribution system problems on voltage, but a huge power purchase excess because they could have optimized a lot of power that they were purchasing from the market or from the contractual agreements they had. Let's go to Africa. When we go to Africa, one of the defining issues for Africa for their inability to attract solar, as you all know, less than 1.5% of global solar investments are going to a continent that has 60% resources and probably the highest need, is inability of utilities to pay for solar. Almost 75% of utilities are cash negative, and therefore for any private sector to sell power, there's a problem of payment security. Now, I must confess, having worked on Africa for 11 years, the continent has been very bold in trying different forms of privatization of distribution. Unfortunately, most privatizations are not working. And the question there is, has a time come where technology and AI can actually help address the system inefficiencies in distribution? And then, in India, we have been involved over the last 6 months of a very ambitious endeavor where the success of India on digital payment stack is now being replicated on energy through the India Energy Stack, which seeks to have an interoperable system of sharing information, allowing millions of people to trade power with each other. What the system that India is envisaging, almost like the Amazon replication in energy, is that millions of Indians with having rooftop and battery storage will be trading power to each other depending on who is actually giving them a better price, right from in Delhi to Karnataka. Can you imagine what it does to the distribution system and in terms of markets? So we see this enormous complexity of issues that I just talked about, and we came to a conclusion that the defining issue for the distribution system, which both generates cash, but also needs to give the last mile connectivity on solar, is to look at what kind of technology and AI will help absorb that system. That led us to then talking to a whole range of global players, having global discussions, and we have eventually came out with a global AI mission for energy, which seeks to provide a framework on following 5 pillars. The first part is that there is not a shared understanding of what is the IT systems and IT prerequisites that are really essential for any distribution utility to look at absorbing large amounts of renewable energy in the system. Each distribution utility, of course, will not have a standard IT architecture, but the elements of what it means to have a SCADA, what it means to have a distribution renewable energy management system, what it means in terms of an enabling IT architecture and a data policy for sharing the data, unfortunately, that does not exist. So we have started first of looking at a data policy elements where any distribution company in the world that seeks to achieve both distributed renewable energy absorption as well as a very high level of renewable energy absorption must have a very clear IT architecture that is essential prerequisite for them to absorb distributed renewable energy. The next element of this is there are AI applications. ISA is today supporting 5 countries on digital twins for distribution companies that will allow a replicable IT digital twin of a distribution company on real-time availability of reverse flows from millions of solar pumps, rooftop systems in allowing system optimization of costs. B, rectification of all faults happening within less than 10 minutes. And C, allowing easier consumer service in terms of new connections and other abilities. We are capturing all of it through user cases. There are some systems in Europe which are really good, and there is a huge scope for replicability of those European systems. A lot of innovation, as I mentioned, is happening in India, and we believe our role is to share knowledge across continents, across countries, on what are the use cases on regulation, on systems, on data policy, IT architectures. That's first pillar. The second pillar, and I must confess, this seems so simple, but it's baffling, that the startups which are trying to put AI solutions do not understand electrical engineering, and electrical engineers, especially in developing countries, think of IT as a support service of managing their laptops. Huge cultural baggage of electrical engineers not understanding AI and AI engineers not understanding energy. So we have started the second pillar on setting up a skills development program, working with at least 3 or 4 institutions who take this as a priority, of developing a set of training programs where probably a lot of electrical engineers will have to be trained on AI, in addition to a lot of startups. I was in San Francisco, I met 10 of them who are actually working on these use cases of AI in energy across the world. But for them to have a better understanding of the cultural change dimension that is very essential for getting some of these elements. The third is on this innovation ecosystem. I must confess, in my role, I meet a lot of very young students, budding entrepreneurs who have outstanding ideas on AI applications, but they don't yet have a consolidated platform of being nurtured and thinking about what will it take for working with 100 consumers to 1 million consumers on scale. So our endeavor is to create platforms, not only with ISA, but a lot of private sector across countries on very interesting ideas. I'll tell you, a jury I was in, there was a very budding young woman who had a pilot for putting a very small $5 device in every battery that will give lifelong estimate of battery life to everyone. Those who have done this business understand that one of the defining problems of resale and others is to have a real-time assessment of battery life. And her vision was that in entire battery passport systems that a lot of countries are really talking about, can this be institutionalized? Just to give you an idea. Fourth pillar is on interoperable systems. And Europe, India, and some of the other countries really believe in the power of interoperable systems that can become a lot more global on AI. Of course, as we all know, US believes in proprietary systems. It's a much larger international battle, but we believe it is very important that there are some standards, including on policies and regulations, that will be very important to define the way forward for these AI applications. And finally, there needs to be some blended finance, because we believe until unless those with concessional finance, whether countries, multilateral agencies, bilateral agencies, can coordinate together in coming towards a pool of some blended finance and some support through venture capital, this industry will not be able to come to scale. Now, one of the interesting aspects I feel is the way forward is the implications of proliferation of AI in distribution can bring down the overall climate finance needs for clean energy, tripling renewable energy, we believe, can be reduced by as much as 25% compared to estimates. Because if you really use technology along with cultural change well, then the megawatts and megawatts of new renewable energy and the transition finance and the additional transmission investments that are needed can be optimized enormously. And our next frontier is to bring this in the climate finance discussions, on the COP discussions, that the next frontier for absorbing renewable energy and energy security and energy transition under current times will be on hand-holding these frameworks of AI applications that have huge implications for climate finance. So I spoke a lot. Thank you very much, and I really look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khanna, for highlighting various aspects of this AI discussion that we have been having in India and also our different ISA member countries and even in Europe. The entire energy transition discussion is at the heart of how we are going to use AI in the coming years. And thank you for highlighting various aspects about sharing knowledge across continents, how we need to break silos between AI, electrical engineering, and IT, how do we develop innovation ecosystems, and how standards and regulations are very, very important for developing these ecosystems, along with developing the financial capability of financing this, again, the ecosystem part of it. So the next part of this discussion I would move to would be about the futures of energy systems and how they can be smarter, but then we also need to make sure that they are flexible in today's day and age, because we heard about several aspects of problems in the distribution sector and how we need to look at different kinds of DRD. And the next part of our program brings together experts who are working at the frontiers of this transformation and how energy systems can be more flexible, from grid innovation to next generation of solar technologies to hydrogen ecosystem, integrated buildings, and clean mobility. So may I now invite our distinguished panelists who are here on stage to join us. Dr. Norella Constantinescu, who's the Deputy Director, IRENA Innovation and Technology Center, Professor Ian Marius Peters, Group Leader, Forschungszentrum Jülich, and he's also the advisor to Program on Solar PV and Battery Waste Management, Mr. Dieter Moore, Founder, Arkansas, Mr. Yan Yan from HDF Energy, Mr. Joseph Teja, Senior Specialist at CalSTART, Drive to Zero. Moderating this discussion is Mr. Christopher Sorensen, advisor to ISA's Program on Technology, Roadmap and Policy, and also on Green Hydrogen Innovation Center. Over to you, Mr. Christopher, for the next set of discussions.
Thank you very much, and welcome to everyone. Thank you for participating. We have now proof that solar can scale from the European examples. And the next step then is, how do we create this ecosystem and use digital technologies to manage all the components of that, the grid, storage, mobility, buildings, and materials that are up and coming? How do we weave that fabric so that we get the most out of it? And finally, how do we balance AI usage of power versus AI applications to optimize power? So we'll take a round with our experts on hand. We're covering all those bases with the people here joining us. And I'd like to start with Dr. Norella Constantinescu. And the question we would like to begin with is, these grids were not originally designed for bidirectional and flexible applications. So that's quite a challenge which we see quite often as we integrate renewables and storage into the grid. How do we tackle this conundrum? What are your experiences?
So thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting me actually to this panel. I would start by building up on the storyline Timur and you, Mr. Khanna, described. So we move from renewables and deployments, what you mentioned, Gurlan, before, to electrification, and then there are the grids in the middle. Sometimes they are forgotten. It's more complex. Power system engineers are difficult engineers to cope with. What I will like to add, so it's the grids, but it's also the flexibility, and the flexibility needs I will start with. Instead of only jumping to the solution. And the flexibility, we see them at the system level, and of course they are also at project level. And we have looked into both. So from the point of view of the power system, we have the expansion of the grids, we have the grid enhancing technologies, and some of them, I think, are also categorized as digital solutions, like the SCADA system, like energy management system, and sensors and dynamic line rating, and all these technologies, which some of them are quite well deployed in Europe. So Europe at the transmission level has these technologies integrated. At the distribution level, it's a little bit less. Maybe there it's a need to enhance. And I think this is also valid at the global level. Coming to this second layer regarding the flexibility needs at the system level. So we have done an assessment. I think we took into account the G20 countries. So by looking at time perspective, daily, weekly, and monthly. And because the solar, it's the most deployed variable technology, so it's good, it's deploying, but has also the, of course, the variability component. We see an increase between 2020 to 2030 by 4 times, 5 times, and by 2050, flexibility needs to cover the daily flexibility. It's increasing by 10 times. What does it mean this in terms of total electricity demand? It's to go from around 7% to maybe 30% by 2050. So we talk about an important share of total electricity demand. For the more wind deployments, and Europe, because I will try also to make the parallel with Europe. Europe, of course, deploys solars, but also it's a region which has also a lot of wind, and therefore the long duration storage becomes important, and their weekly and monthly flexibility needs will increase by 3 times compared with 2019 by 2050. So we need also these elements to be considered. Mr. Kenneth talked about the decentralization, and this is true. So most of the systems are decentralized, and we are talking about hundreds of millions of assets, and therefore, of course, AI and the data centers development poses also certain challenges for the energy, for the electricity system in terms of, maybe not so much in terms of energy requirements, but in terms of capacity and where these data centers are located, at least for the moment. But can also bring the benefits. And you mentioned some of the use cases which you encountered. We also looked at how the artificial intelligence and digital solutions can be applied for the power system. We see as a first layer the data collection and data in terms of granularity, quality, real time. And this goes to the interoperability and the layer of architecture based on which you can build different services for the power system. So this is the monitoring, and all these technologies I mentioned previously and many more, smart meters and so on, can support actually this data collection. Further, it's of course the forecasting, which is very important for solar as well as for wind, but also for the demand, because when we electrify, the demand will also become in a way weather dependent, and we have to have these predictions also on the demand, and I will not enter all the technical details. These systems, as you mentioned, and I will give an example. So having to cope with so many assets, of course, they have a need for automation of the decision support at transmission or distribution level. And I would like to give this example about dynamic congestion management, which allow actually the grid operators to run the transmission lines close to real-time limits. I will use a term of power system engineering while respecting the N-1 criteria. And this type of device can be deployed in 10 to 12 months, comparing to 7 to 10 years, which you will need to actually expand the transmission. I don't say that this is a straightforward application. It is applied in Europe, I think in Spain and in some Latin American countries, but it is a kind of measure which can be used in order to cope to different time leads between the digital solution deployments and the real expansion of the grid. There are barriers, so regulation has to be adopted. Of course, the TSOs have to test it in real environments and so on. In addition to the flexibility layer and to artificial intelligence digital solution layer, of course, there are the customers. And here the customers and the example you gave, which I think in Europe will be translated in an energy community exchange of electricity. I think this is really important because this can probably reduce, so the optimization of the system is done locally and then reduces actually the impact over the general, so the system level. So I don't know, I will stop here. Maybe I will have the time for another round.
Excellent overview. And I think one good case we might add is the case of Denmark moving from coal as a baseline to managing their TSO grids where renewables are absorbed maximally, and then the coal-fired plants are dynamic, in fact. So those systems are being applied to great advantage, and we need to replicate those across the continent, essentially, to make this work. And another component of flexibility is, of course, our storage and hydrogen systems, which also must be accounted for to make the optimal solutions. And we have, luckily, a practitioner here who is implementing these solutions, Mr. Akdiansya. We like to hear, in fact, part of the flexibility of the assets includes batteries, hydrogen, and they're sometimes portrayed as competing solutions. But perhaps you could help us illuminate where they fit, which role they have, and how they complement each other in our future energy system.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you for having me in the forum. So yeah, I think like the HDF energy, we developed the solution. We integrate between renewable energy. For now, is solar PV with the hydrogen as an energy storage. We also combining with the battery and also the fuel cell to convert the hydrogen into electricity. So this kind of solution, what we want to do, we can put like the energy storage more than 8 hours, that we combine the battery storage more like I think a short-term storage like 2 until 4 hours, while the hydrogen more in the more than 6 hours. So that's the idea. And also we already calculate that this kind of solution is already I think, compete with the diesel price in terms of the power plant. So that solution, the goal is to replace or substitute the diesel power plant in the island area. So that's why we call it the hydrogen ecosystem, because actually this kind of combination, we can provide 24-hour electricity using renewable energy. I think there is a lot of question why we don't use the battery like the BSS and why we use the hydrogen. I think in some kind of paper, hydrogen is more the long duration storage, but in our case, I think long duration storage is starting from 6 or 8 hours. So we already calculate, I think from the 6 until 12 hours, the hydrogen as energy storage is already competitive. That's why we utilize the hydrogen as energy storage to provide stable electricity at the night. So this kind of solution, we can provide stable electricity for 24 hours. And also it will be secure the grid stability, of course, in the island area, because I think in the island area, the grid is not that strong. So we have to make sure that the electricity is quite stable and support the grid stability in the area. And we call it hydrogen ecosystem because like this kind of solution is not just potential to give the grid stability in the island area, but the hydrogen itself has the potential to provide the clean fuel to other application in the area. Example, like for the industry, what we can do also in the islands, we can provide this clean fuel also for the inter-island ferry. So because I think in the island, the main transportation is inter-island ferry. So what we can do, we can provide the clean electricity that's very stable for 24 hours, but also we have the component of the hydrogen. This hydrogen we can supply to the port, and this hydrogen can be utilized by the inter-island ferry. So that's the solution from HDF Energy.
It sounds, in fact, like you're on the way to creating a mainstream solution for these electrical grids. How do you see the next 10 years evolving in this regard?
Yeah, so I think in the next 10 years, you're asking, right? So for the next 10 years, I think if we want to replace the diesel power plant, so the focus still in the islands area that still rely on diesel power plant, there is no other potential of renewable energy. So they have to rely on the solar PV for renewable energy. So this kind of solution, of course, it will be implemented in many areas, specifically in the island or archipelago country like Indonesia, Philippines, Fiji, or oceanic countries that there's a lot of islands and they don't have any renewable energy resources other than solar PV. And another case that this kind of in the 10 years, I think while the hydrogen or there is a mandatory of about decarbonization of many sectors, including mobility. So this kind of island, they can also not secure the clean electricity, but also secure the clean fuels. So I think right now in the maritime sector, I think if some kind of ship or in the vessel, they want to docking and they need the clean fuel, so the island also can provide it. So that also depends on the regulation, I think, because if the country doesn't have regulation to support like the decarbonization or there is no mandatory, I think the 10 years of the hydrogen in the future will be the same like now. Because I think in the hydrogen is kind of rely on the regulation. So if there is no carbon tax, I think there is no mandatory of decarbonization, the hydrogen will be not competitive to other like fossil fuel, of course, and other fuel. So if there is a mandatory incentive or maybe like the carbon tax to account is, so the hydrogen will be more competitive. So I think the application of the hydrogen right now is not just to replace the diesel power plant, but also for the other decarbonization, including maybe for the green steel, the green fertilizer, and or other industry that relies now still on the fossil fuel.
It's an excellent illustration of combining grid systems and logistics, transportation, and there are many aspects with mobility which can also contribute. We have also somebody working with heavy freight, and there's a nice idea about converting heavy freight from a demand to actually a source of grid stability. So I'd like to ask Joseph Teja if you could give us a case example of how this works.
Thanks, Christopher. Quickly, thank you, ISA, for giving us this opportunity. And CalStat we are a US-based not-for-profit with offices in the US and Europe. So we are closely working in the transport sector decarbonization for the past 34 plus years. And in 2021, at COP26 CalSTART, together with the government of Netherlands, we launched a global memorandum of understanding on heavy-duty vehicles, which this coalition today brings together 43 signatory countries, representing 40% of global GDP and 1 in every electric trucks in the world. And we do also have a 300 industry partners coalition in this network. So through this, under this umbrella platform, we also lead the Global Green Road Corridors Initiative, where we work with governments, MDBs, industry partners, and the utilities. And we co-developed 13 freight corridors across Europe, Latam, Africa, Australia, and Asia, including a new corridor is being launched next week in Colombia. We closely work with ISA as a key partner on solar integrated mobility on multiple global forums. Coming to your question, Christopher, the key shift is to view charging hubs not as energy consumers, but as energy assets. Tony Seba, author of Rethinking Transportation, he highlights that the mobility sector is undergoing a profound transformation from an energy architecture, which was based on atoms, fuels, to one based on electrons, which is electricity, which is enabling a more decentralized, intelligent, and sustainable transport system. So a future-ready freight charging hubs, we look at as a combining 4 components. One is, the first component is RE and battery storage. The third component is the smart charging, and finally, AI-driven energy management. So together, these they can absorb the excess RE generation, shift charging away from peak periods, and providing flexibility services to the grid. And from our partners network, we have already seen this emerging in Europe. We have our industry partners, Milens in Netherlands, is building Europe's megawatt scale truck charging network, while Iberdrola, a utility partner in our network in Spain, is integrating RE and storage into charging infrastructure on a Mediterranean corridor, which is a 1,500-kilometer stretch between Algeciras in Spain to Avignon in France. So this is done in partnership with Scania, BP Pulse, and other players. These examples demonstrate how transport electrification can support broader energy systems objectives. And from CalSTART perspective, the future charging hub is not just a fuel station, it's an energy asset. A 1 to 5 megawatt truck charging hub, which is co-located with storage, can reduce peak grid demand close to 30 to 50%, while simultaneously supporting RE and grid stability. And we saw Europe has already leading the renewable transition. I think the next step is ensuring charging infrastructure actively participate in the energy markets.
Sounds very encouraging. And you mentioned energy systems and smart meters, which are also presented in our first instance. I'm curious, what do we need to do? What market mechanisms or policies do we need to make sure that it gets scaled up quickly?
Yeah. So to unlock this value, we need flexibility market that reward grid services and dynamic pricing linked to RE availability, which many of the partners have highlighted, and building capacity and resilience frameworks, which Timur and Mr. Khanna is also highlighted for the storage-backed infrastructure, would be very much needed to scale it up. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And of course, your logistics are going from one facility to the other. So there's a piece of the puzzle we're missing here yet. Built-in PV can also be a factor where we can also turn facilities into power hubs. And we have an expertise here with Mr. Dieter Moore. And we're curious, how do we get this BIPV to turn buildings from consumers to producers? And how do we overcome this limited adoption which we see today?
Thank you for having me. How much time do I have for this question, or to answer the question?
About 2.5 minutes.
Okay, I try to do my best. Yeah, this is one of the biggest questions which I ask myself since 20 years, because I'm 20 years in this business. But in general, I would say the difference between PV and BIPV, it's a different mindset. And if you overcome this mindset, maybe it's easier to have a bigger rollout in BIPV. But what you should consider is always this multifunctionality. So when you speak about BIPV, it's not only energy conversion from sun to electricity. You always have to keep in mind that it's an additional functionality, like architecture. Maybe you have a roof instead of your roof and on top PV. So this needs to be considered, and then you see that BIPV has much more than only PV. And sometimes these things you can't calculate, because what is the worth of architecture? So you can't count it in euro or rupee or whatever. So this is maybe that what I mentioned before. If you have the mindset for BIPV, you could maybe overcome these things. And because I have only 1 minute for this question, if the chance to say I need 3 main pillars to improve BIPV a little bit more, I would say the first would be education. So this is something what we discussed here today, and this train the trainer. I heard it the first time, because normally I train people, but I think best way for me would be also to train trainers with my know-how. So education. The second one is cooperation or collaboration. Maybe in your second question, I go a little bit deeper into that one. And also regulation. I'm not the friend of to over-regulate things, but you know, we are sitting here in Brussels, so we have a nearly zero energy directive. That means every building in the European Union should be nearly zero energy. And how could you do it without activating the envelope? And this goes very slow from the first beginning, because what the European Union is doing, it's only a directive which goes to the member states, and the member states are not so fast as expected in converting it into their local regulations. And in some member states, for example, I'm coming from Austria, we have 9 federal states, Germany has 16 federal states. Every federal state has a local building code and needs to be implemented there, and with a lot of different approaches.
It sounds like a wide-scale skills development we need, both in the public and the private sector. And there's a lot of collaboration to get these BIPV elements integrated into buildings, both from architectural and construction side, and then the cost-benefit, which I think we touched on yesterday in our discussion. So how does this cost-benefit get transformed as we go forward? Or are we looking at it the wrong way? Is cost perhaps the wrong way to look at it as we look at resilient energy systems?
This is maybe related to this mindset, because in PV we have seen the costs are coming down dramatically in the last years. And when we speak about BIPV, it's a little bit architecture, and you can't only speak about costs in architecture. But what I always say, we have on one hand, let's say, the PV industry and the high-end BIPV industry. You know, when you see architects like Norman Foster, Renzo Piano, they always design with PV in their envelopes. And this is very high-priced lighthouse projects and so on. And there's something in between. We discussed it yesterday. If we can find companies who develop whole systems, let's say a kind of standardized BIPV panel in a mass production, then the costs will come down, from my perspective, dramatically.
Yes, so scale and standardization.
Yeah.
And of course, we can always hope for some material improvements, which would create more efficiencies. That could be our next topic, in fact. Perovskites are up and coming. I think we've all heard the term by now. And those are evolving. We're very curious then to have our expert, Professor Ian Marius Peters, to give us some insight into the key scientific and manufacturing hurdles for perovskites and how you see the future of this material development.
Mm-hmm. So there's one key scientific task that we have to solve, that is the stability of perovskite solar cells. Silicon PV modules have achieved something truly remarkable. You can put them outside, you can leave them there for 25, 30 years, and they continue to work. And if you think about things that you leave outside, it is no small feat to leave something out for that long time and it still continues to function. So perovskites are not yet there. Their stability is not as good as that of silicon solar cells. And we need to improve that. The second thing, the technological challenge that we have is to upscale the production. Currently, most of the research that is done on perovskites, most of the results that we're seeing being developed are done on very small areas, and we need to transfer this to larger areas. So the good news is that provided it's physically possible to do that, and there's very good reason to hope that it is, then we're extremely well set up here in Europe to solve these challenges. But there are some bad news as well, and they have to do with a kind of linear thinking that we employ with this. The question that I received was that, well, what are the challenges that we have to solve first before we can start implementing and making these solar cells? And there's a very linear way of thinking about this. Now, I've been to China last week on the largest trade fair that they have on solar. And on that trade fair, I find 10 plus manufacturers that are actually already now making these modules on large areas. These modules aren't stable, and they are to some extent non-uniform in the way that they are made. But they are out there and they're produced in masses, and by the time that we have solved these issues, these factories will have de-risked the entire manufacturing process. They will have established the entire supply chain of making them, and they will be within days, weeks, be capable of producing them in masses. By the time that we are starting to think about how we set up the manufacturing infrastructure here, and if we don't recognize that the game, how these things are developed and deployed, has changed, and if we don't get a lot faster than we currently are, then we will lose this technology and we will lose future technologies in exactly the same way. I don't know if I can be blunt enough about this point.
I think you threw down the gauntlet there for our European participants here. And the Chinese learn by doing method seems to work in many instances. They also have strategic intent in what they're doing, both in PV, but now in hydrogen as well, electrolysis, where they do similar things. They build it and they fix it and they build it again. So what would it take for Europe to take the lead in this domain? How would you see us tackling that challenge and getting ahead of the game and leading for the Global South, for example?
We would have to start manufacturing today. Right now, we would have to set up PV manufacturing in Europe at scale again. What we have currently is nowhere near enough of what we need.
If I just take a tangential topic, but very relevant, circularity. So the materials that go into perovskites, they're a little bit different than what we're used to today, but in all cases, we're looking at what happens at end of life. So how do we take these considerations into account?
So for perovskite specifically, that technology has one very unique challenge, is that all the high efficiency perovskite materials are using a certain amount of lead. It's a small amount, but it is there. We're talking about 1 gram per square meter of a solar panel, roughly. And one of the challenges we have to solve with that material in particular is that we have to be able to make sure that the lead is staying within a cycle. So we can't have these panels be outside and leach the lead into the ground, so we have to prepare for that. That is technologically possible, and we're currently also, for example, also in my group, developing procedures to extract that lead and make sure that we have that always, that we always know where it is. On a more general scale on solar recycling, one thing that I need to say about this is that solar is unique as an energy technology in the sense that it has always developed and grown exponentially rather than linearly, which is what we know from most other energy technologies. So also for end-of-life treatment of solar panels, we are going to transfer from a state for where we have very little or very few solar panels to deal with, which is what we have today, a few 10,000 tons overall, to a state where we have to deal with millions of tons of old solar panels. And that is going to happen faster than with any other energy technology that we've had to deal with. So we need to start preparing to set up the infrastructure and also very importantly, the information that we need to collect in order to be able to recover and treat those materials that they maintain their value. Everything that helps us to sort and to know what we have and what we deal with is going to help us there.
Yes, please.
I only want to add something about this recycling of PV models, because when I work with architects, this is sometimes not the first, but the second question. Because when they build a building, a sustainable building, they like to know what will happen afterwards. And sometimes, you know, I don't really know what to answer. It's similar to the glass business, because glass will be not recycled because they don't know what is contained in the glass, and the whole glass process will be maybe interrupted. But what I've heard about, maybe you can tell me more, the glass from PV panels is more pure, and so the glass producers are happy if they can get the glass. It's true?
We'll put it slightly different. It's different. PV uses a slightly different glass with a lower iron content and sometimes antimony in it. What it gets to is that normally glass producers are happy to have enough of one sort. So if we have a massive amount of solar panels and we can collect them and treat solar glass in one go, it would open up opportunities. One thing I can say about PV is that it is probably the most recyclable energy technology that we have. It is intrinsically easier to deal with old solar panels than with almost anything else that produces energy.
Aligns extremely well with the new ISA program, Sunrise, which Colleen is leading, in fact, so I encourage you all to take a look at that via our website or materials. It's a global challenge, and we see an opportunity as we go to the Global South, where we need to deploy at scale to have standards and expectations for the circularity of the materials, also for the economic value of recovery of the materials. So it's an excellent lead-in. Now we've been through all these elements. We have new bidirectional nodes for logistics, for storage, for variable energy, and AI is an opportunity to make all that work together and to get the most out of it. So I'm curious, if we go back to you, Dr. Narela, since we're using this for forecasting, congestion management, and so forth, where do you see the best opportunity for AI to transform? In the first place, in Europe, where we have brownfield legacy assets, but in the second instance, in our greenfield, Global South opportunities, where we're just starting with infrastructure and these systems.
So this time I will not use my notes, I will speak freely as well. So what we see in terms of deployment of AI, so the first layer, which I think it was used at the grid, so I'll focus now on the grid. I think it was a little bit on the establishment of the digital twins. In a way, they are there because in Europe there is what is called a common grid model. So there is a kind of model which is established at the level of TSOs. And based on that, I think there are two use cases which will appear. I don't know if they are the most important. So it's the predictive maintenance. So this is already used by many grid operators. And secondly, it will be the forecasting, actually, which helps to reduce those flexibility needs, for example, or to also reduce curtailments and so on. However, as I mentioned, we see more and more these technologies like the dynamic congestion management, which are already integrated. So probably what it's coming a little bit later, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, I should not say it, probably it will be more the automation of the system because at the level of the grid, of course, there is this need, and I'm talking here more about Europe, there is this need to ensure that the critical infrastructure is protected, and then the AI use to train on the data will be in a way limited. So yes, there is the interoperability, but in a way all the infrastructure data has to be has to remain protected. Open source was used as an example, but has to be in a certain domain. Coming to the Global South, and then I will go a little bit more outside the AI, and another element which I would like to mention, and which maybe it's very relevant for solar. We looked not only at the integration from system perspective at national or regional level, we looked at, and we see, because we collect the data regarding the cost of PV, it's going down, but this year it starts to plateauing, so it's not going down anymore. I don't know which is going to be the situation next year. We see more and more hybrid projects coming in, which is a combination of PV, so these are in most cases, and batteries, because the cost of the batteries is going down. So it's the cost of technologies which is driving. And we tried to mimic, actually, we call it 24/7 electricity supply, which is requested especially by industrial applications. So, and we see actually these projects more feasible in the global south due to natural resources. So, of course, there are better radiation spots for solar than maybe in Europe, as well as for wind. And what we see is that we have a sample of 252 projects, and for a reliability, I think, of 90%, yes. Almost all these projects are below $100 per megawatt hour, which actually it's a comparison with fossil fuels. And these can supply, so 90% of the time reliability, 90%, so constant electricity to demand. So I would say that the activities has to happen at the system level, but we see more and more this project level mainly driven by solar PV and by the batteries hybrid projects.
Excellent. And of course, these hybrid solutions, when they're built greenfield, we have the opportunity to create homogeneous data, which can then create the baseline for our energy management systems and add on to these ecosystems. So I wish we could start over in Europe and do everything from the beginning, but it's tricky with the smart meters, the different data sources, and how do you create that homogeneity. I know from experience. So we need some way to use these variable data sources to create a perhaps suboptimal, but a much better way to manage the systems. The challenge, though, if we look at, an AI requires data centers. And data centers take a lot of energy. So there's a question of, do the data centers take more energy than they optimize for in the end? And I'd like to open for everyone here, the participants, in this question mark, the dilemma of AI, data centers, and energy use. How do we solve this conundrum, and where do you see the balance occurring? The floor is open to anyone who would like to contribute. I should start with you, Dr. Norella.
So actually, when we did this assessment of the combination between PV and storage, the quality of electricity supply. So there we talk about security from the perspective of electricity supply continuity. The applications theoretically are for industrial sites, but also for the data centers. However, so in the context of Europe, this might help because PV can be deployed very fast. So there is the time component which is in the favor of PV. The same with the battery storage. However, I think there is still the need to have a backup from the grid because the data centers require, they are software driven sites, I would say, and their load profile and the time they will need and the reaction of time they will need. So these require some backup from the grid. This is a little bit my perspective.
Yes. Other inputs on the dilemma? I can point to a couple of new cases which I'm aware of. On the one side, how do you create variable data centers, which will have a demand response element, and this is being set up right now in Denmark. And the other is related, it's about direct connections. So data centers creating their own additionality, you see this quite a lot in the US, where they're building large centers which don't have enough power on the grid, so they build their own power systems to provide the base load they want. So that's incorporated into the price of the data center. And that means you're not skewing the grid for the existing consumers, which is also another consideration. So it's a question of equitability and access to power and the price of power. So I suspect this direct connection and demand response versions of data centers may be an emerging systemic approach, which we can see more of and perhaps use in our greenfield solutions.
I may answer, yes. The data centers for certain moments of time depends on what type of data centers we are talking about. But for example, when they train the algorithm, there is a kind of buffer where they can provide actually probably flexibility to the system. So it's not just taking the energy, but also being able to shift. However, when there are prompts, so then the latency is very important, and there they need probably immediate supply.
Classic challenges with latency and demand response. So that concludes our panel discussion, and I'd like to finish with a lightning round. Give you all a chance to give your 2 bits. So we're looking at a 15-second response. If you could prioritize one action for Europe over the next 5 years to build these intelligent ecosystems, what would it be?
Mine is easy.
Don't fight over going first.
Start making more solar cells.
For BIPV, I would say education. It's the top priority. And on several levels, university level, but also architects and real estate companies. And I think this would be a good driver.
From CalSTAT side, we would say that establish a continent-wide flexibility market that integrates transport, storage, and RE assets.
HDF?
Yeah, I think from HDF, I think integrate with many options for the energy storage, so including the hydrogen for long duration and other for short-term storage. Yeah.
Dr. Noria.
So Europe set already the grids, EU grids package, so this is already in a way done. I think what is needed is to add the flexibility and digital and AI in the layers Europe is looking at the pan-European system.
Thank you very much. I'll pass it back on to my colleague, Gurleen.
Yes. Thank you so much, Christopher, and thank you to all the panelists for an engaging and a very insightful discussion. Now we'll move on to the next segment of this session, which is sustainable energy systems. So, International Solar Alliance has been proactively addressing the challenge of sustainability and circularity through its Sunrise initiative, which is solar upcycling network for recycling, innovation, and stakeholder engagement. So, just to share more on the update of this Sunrise network, I would request my colleague to please play the video. Thank you. Can I please have the slides on? So as we've discussed and also Christopher mentioned, so we launched Sunrise Network in November last year at ISA Assembly. And I will share the updates that we have to the platform now. Yes. I think we covered all of that in the deck, in the previous I would say video. But then I would like to mention that in Sunrise, we have 6 different verticals: database mapping, policy, regulatory, policy and regulatory and readiness support, capacity building and awareness support, technology and innovation, regional infrastructure investment, and global community of practice. So now, one of the questions that have also been asked yesterday was that where is Sunrise heading? So when we launched this initiative, one question guided us, which was how do we move from awareness to implementation? Because countries do not just need another report on solar waste. We are very clear about that. They need practical pathways to build circular solar economies. So that is why Sunrise follows a 3-year transformation journey. As you can see, in 2026, we are laying the foundations. We are developing a global solar waste outlook, calculating how much waste would be there in our member countries by 2050. We have launched battery recycling guidelines yesterday, which is available on our website for all of you to see as well. We are establishing a community of practice and creating tools to help our countries understand the scale of future waste streams. In 2027, we shift towards implementation through circularity calculators, innovation challenges, best practice exchanges, regional dialogues, and also an annual circularity conference that we are planning to host in March next year at Delhi. By 2028, our ambition is to support our countries with technical guidelines, auditors training program, regional recycling approaches, and evidence-based policy adoption. In essence, we move from data to capability and finally to action. So strong ideas require strong institutions. So Sunrise therefore operates through a 3-tier governance structure. First, the Sunrise Advisory Board, which has been constituted in March this year, which serves as a strategic compass, bringing together global leaders from policy, industry, recycling, and research to guide priorities and shape the long-term vision of the program. Second is the Coordination Committee, which acts as the execution hub, ensuring effective program delivery, country engagement, partnerships, and resource mobilization housed within the ISA Secretariat. Third are the working groups and community of practice, which form the knowledge engine of Sunrise. This is where expertise is translated into practical guidance for countries. Together, these 3 layers ensure that Sunrise is not simply a discussion platform. It is designed to deliver outcomes that we all are looking forward to achieve. And one of the most encouraging developments has been the response from the global community. Today, Sunrise Community of Practice includes 132 institutional participants representing 117 institutions across 34 countries. Participants span across governments, industry, research institutions, startups, multilateral organizations, and civil society. More importantly, 18 ISA member countries have already expressed direct interest through their national focal points. This tells us something very, very important. Circularity is no longer a niche conversation. Countries, all countries across the globe, are actively seeking answers. How do we estimate future waste? How do we estimate or establish appropriate regulation? How do we finance recycling infrastructure? And how do we create viable business models? And perhaps more importantly, how do we learn from each other so that we don't have to reinvent this wheel? Sunrise aims to provide this collaborative space for all our partners, member countries, and members of this community of practice. So a platform is only meaningful if it provides some tangible outcomes. So I'm therefore very, very delighted that Sunrise already is delivering knowledge products. Yesterday, we proudly launched ISA's first Sunrise knowledge product, the Battery Recycling Guidelines for ISA member countries. These globally benchmarked chemistry agnostic guidelines are designed to help countries establish safe, traceable, and circular battery value chains. We have also developed a work on India's PV waste challenge, which we presented at India Energy Week earlier this year, and copper value chains in South Asia and how we can recycle them, highlighting how circularity intersects with broader issues of resource security and industrial resilience, and presenting a case for regional recycling hub in India with Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal as member countries from where we can have a case through a hub and spoke model. This reflects a simple philosophy that ISA is moving from dialogue to delivery. Looking ahead, one of our major milestones next year would be the first Sunrise Annual Circularity Conference planned for March 2027. Our vision is to create a global platform bringing together governments, regulators, manufacturers, recyclers, financiers, researchers, and innovators. A platform that bridges both science and policy, connects innovation with investment, and identifies partnerships needed to accelerate circular solar economies. We would be very delighted to see a strong participation and leadership from Europe in shaping this agenda. So, ladies and gentlemen, the first chapter of Solar Revolution was about deployment. The next chapter that we have here is stewardship. And the true meaning of success will not simply be how many gigawatts we installed, as I mentioned in the beginning. This will be how responsibly we manage them throughout their entire life cycle. Europe has been a global leader in circular economy thinking and sustainable frameworks, and we have examples of WEEE directives. ISA member countries represent some of the world's fastest growing solar markets. Together, this presents us a very unique opportunity, an opportunity to ensure that future solar systems are not only intelligent and flexible, but also very circular by design. I would therefore like to invite all of you to engage with Sunrise as partners, as contributors, and as co-creators of a truly circular solar future. Because if we succeed, every solar panel installed today can become a resource for tomorrow. Thank you very much. So with this, we would like to conclude this session. So dear everyone, thank you very, very much for your participation and contributions. And as we conclude this dialogue, perhaps the takeaway of all these discussions is Europe's next challenge is not simply to install more solar. It is to orchestrate entire energy ecosystems that are intelligent, flexible, resilient, and circular. And in doing so, Europe and International Solar Alliance have an opportunity not only to shape the future of clean energy, but also to shape it together. Thank you very much, and this brings the session to a close.
For those of you who would like to, we'd like to get a photo of the participants up here with this very nice background.
Yes, please.
before we go to lunch? It's voluntary, of course.